Alright, hello everybody and welcome back to the build. As you can see, we got the Superlite coupe chassis with the cooling tubes installed. They are looking good. In this video, we are going to cover routing and installing the AC hoses and also the heater hoses. Okay, so stay tuned. Okay, well in a prior video I covered the general layout of how I'm going to route the AC hoses and also the heater hoses, so I'm not going to go through that again. A couple comments though. I mean, every SLC is unique sort of in its own way. You know, it accepts a wide variety of engines, and those engines can have the compressor mounted up top or down below, on the left side or the right side. So there's always a bit of uniqueness to the way people route these heater and these AC hoses. Okay, typically what happens is in the kit, and we're going to go over to the work table. So I've got a bunch of components here. Now the components on the left side, these are the components that come with the kit. So these are sort of the basic components you need to connect the compressor to the evaporator and the condenser. What I have here on this side, or the right side, are a bunch of specialty fittings that I'm going to use for my particular build. So these are aluminum bendable tubes to connect the condenser to the lines that go into the compressor and also the dryer. You can use the supplied hoses, they're the rubber hoses, but they're a lot more bulkier. And I wanted to run both of these tubes through one hole through the radiator, leaving the other hole for the wiring harness for the front headlights. So I decided to go in this route. A lot of builders use the rubber hoses and it works just fine, but I'm going to take a different approach. These are some specialty fittings. You'll see where these go. Essentially, they're for the condenser lines. Here are these bulkheads. These are all made by Vintage Air, and the bulkheads get the lines through, the chassis wall. And these are for the two heater hoses. This is for the number 10 line. This is for the number 8 line, the number 6 line, and then we have the specialty fittings. Okay, so in this video we will. We're going to start to locate these parts, drill some holes in the chassis, bend up those bend-them tubes, and it shouldn't be too much of a project. Okay, so stay tuned. Okay, well here's the first step. So I have these two specialty fittings attached to the condenser, and the reason I'm going to use these is it makes bending these aluminum tubes a little simpler. Instead of bending them this way and then bending them that way, I simply have to curve them into this hole and then shift it over a little bit. The tube bender, really can't bend super sharp bends at the very end of the tube, so I didn't think it had the ability to actually make this bend, especially with the wider number 8 hose on top. So we're going to use these fittings, and I'm going to start with this hose. I'll do this hose later in the build. Work in process. So this is basically the number 6 line, the aluminum tube I bent up. Now this is the first time I've used a tube bender, and I think this came out okay. More than likely I'll redo this with a new one, now that I know exactly where the bends need to be and get it really crisp. I bought this tube bender from Granger. It was not inexpensive, but it got great reviews, and it is, it's a useful tube. I was able to bend, I was able to unbend. I had the curve going in the wrong direction. So anyway, we'll take a look at this on the car. The only change is I wound up not using that specialty fitting just because I couldn't get the initial bend tight enough, and I wound up just bending this, so you'll see how it's oriented on the condenser. Okay, here you see that aluminum number 6 line attached to the bottom of the condenser. You know, it turned out I did have enough room. I have no idea if I'll have enough room for the number 8 line, but I have the specialty fitting mounted there already. It looks, you know, look, it looks pretty good for the first shot. I'll consider this a prototype piece, and I'll try to make one just you know, as perfect as possible. And this is what it looks like on top. So I sort of like that orientation. And then where I have that black dot on the front of the foot box, that'll be a rubber hose going into the chassis via the bulkhead. Okay, so I think we'll move on. I'll order another part and we'll give that another shot, you know, at some point. Okay, well, bending up the number 10 hose was a complete and epic failure. I'm going to have to regroup. Basically, the tube bender for the 1/2-inch tube bends at a larger radius, and there's just not enough room to make the bend. I'd have to shift that condenser over as far as it goes, and that would block the hole in the radiator on the other side, and I want to use that for the wiring harness. So I'm going to have to regroup and come up with another design. So in the meantime, we'll segue over to starting to install the bulkheads on the chassis. Okay, well, let's move on to another part of the build. I'm going to fuss with that number 8 line at another time. I'm going to get some supplies. I got a couple other designs in mind to solve that problem. So anyway, we are going to basically drill the holes for the heater and the number 10 AC line bulkhead. And basically this is where we're going to put these hoses. People put them in different places. I mean, they run them up to the foot box and then bring them in. They mount them lower on the passenger compartment. I am going to locate these up here because I left room between the frame and the corner of the evaporator to get 3 lines through. So it'll be the 2 heater hoses and the number 10 hose, and they'll wrap around and connect to the evaporator towards the center of the chassis. You know, a couple constraints here that I had to be aware of. So, you know, as I think I did a short video on mocking up the door hinge, or the J hinge they call it, and there's a strut that goes on the J hinge down to the corner of the body. So this is a heater hose fitting, so I wanted to make sure these hoses would clear that strut, and in this case they would. And also we have to make sure it'll clear the body. So I made this J hinge, or the hinge, or the door jamb template, just to make sure we're good to go. So I have plenty of room there for those three hoses. The body sort of comes out in this shape here. So we're going to drill these holes and we'll see how it comes out. Okay, well, we got the 3 holes drilled, and I will tell you though, there's not a lot of room for error here. There's an upper lip inside this hole, and then you actually have the inside of the beam right here, and those nuts that secure those bulkheads are a bit wider than the hole, but it turned out I had enough clearance. I was aware of that originally, you know, but there's not a lot of room for error. You want these up as high as possible so they'll clear the strut. You want these to the left as possible because the body curves in. So I think I nailed it. We'll put the fittings on, we'll take a look at them. Okay, well, here's a good time for the next work in process segment. So you can see we've got the bulkhead fittings through the chassis, and we've got the hoses temporarily attached to them. You know, they look good. They're equally spaced or spaced enough so that the hoses, you know, sort of drape down and curve into the side pod. you try to keep them separated so they don't squeak at all and they stay quiet. If we take a peek inside the upper chassis here we go. So you can see these are sort of tucked in nicely, and those tubes are going to go behind the evaporator, so that worked out good. Maybe I put a speaker down here, so I didn't want to clutter this up with a bunch of hoses. So anyway, that worked out pretty good. The other thing too is we put the heater control valve in. So this is a special heater control valve for LT and LS engines, and it's made by Old Air Products. I made the aluminum bracket. What that allows the engine to do is, if the heater core is off, it prevents all fluid from going to and from the heater core, which is nice, so it doesn't heat up the side pod, but it still lets the fluid circulate fully from the outlet back to the input in the water pump. And apparently if you don't do this and you use a standard heater control valve that shuts off the flow of water, an LS or LT engine will overheat. So so that's sort of a necessity. But I like the positioning of that. And then lastly, I modified these standoffs. You're looking at the number 8 AC compressor hose, and I made the standoffs a little taller, and I added a threaded hole on the top so I can thread the number 8 hose in. I like doing it this way, so I only have a single hole in the chassis, and I attach the standoff, and then I can attach as many items to the standoff as I would like. And I have actually a symmetrical one over here, and this will be the bleed line from the radiator hose, so it's a little smaller hose, 1/4 inch hose. But anyway, I always go for a little symmetry. It always looks good. So anyway, let's move on. Okay, so we're going to jump back to the number 6 and the number 8 lines to the condenser. So what I did was I picked up, for about 16 bucks, you can buy like 20 feet of copper tubing, and I practiced with the tube bender. I was also experimenting with some different shapes for the number 6 and the number 8 lines, and I've come up with a new approach that you'll see in a bit. So I basically ordered 2 of each. If I hit it right on the first pass, great. I'll send the ones I don't use back to Summit Racing. But basically, these are the number 6 lines. I just want to bend that up so it's as clean as possible. And then the longer number 8 will be the tube that goes through the radiator and connects to the condenser. And then this will connect to the specialty fitting and connect up to the back of that tube. So it's just a little easier to make it in 2 parts with all the multiple bends than make a single tube. Okay, so stay tuned. Okay, we're down here at the Joel K workshop, and the workbench is looking rather well at this point. You can tell I'm very busy by all the clutter, but anyway, so this is where we're at. So what you're looking at is the number 6 hose. I'm remaking it, and that tube bender just, it's good at making these big sweeping bends, but it's really not good at these tight bends. And at the very end of the part I made, I need to make some tighter bends. So I came up with this concept of just making a holder with aluminum, and then I'll use a map torch and I'll apply a little heat, and I simply can bend that tube over, and I can get it to almost a 45-degree angle very crisply and very tightly towards the end of the tube. So I'm going to give this a shot, and then we'll take a look at it. Okay, well, that worked out pretty good. I mean, we got a nice tight bend right at the end. Looks like I may have to move it over just a little bit, but I could also reduce this bend just a tiny bit, match it up. But we'll see how this fits, and I'll adjust. Okay, so I think we are done making these or bending these aluminum tubes up for the condenser, and I will say this looks far easier than it is. This is a royal pain to get these bends just right, and I went through a lot of practice and probably 3 of each part until I got it right, until I got it the way I was happy with. So here's the number 6, and this looks nice and crisp. The tail end, we used the map torch and we bent that up. That worked out well. We just sort of ran out of length on the tube, so I had to get a little creative with that sharp end. This is the design I came up with for the number 8 hose. I also did a map torch bend on the end here, and I did this in 2 parts because you literally can't get a bend like this through the hole in the radiator with the thicker 1/2-inch tube. All right, so I'm going to install these parts. There are a number of other holes I have to drill in the front compartment. But what we'll do is we'll segment all this completed, and the next segment will be the final segment and a wrap for this episode. All right, well, this will be the final segment of this video. I am actually really happy how this came out. You're looking at the number 8 aluminum tube and the number 6 aluminum tube, and look at the clearance here. I mean, everything is so tightly packed, between that front splitter bar, the specialty fitting, the condenser mount, the fan shroud, back to the master cylinder. I mean, it just all fit in there. But anyway, this is what the setup looks like. I mean, I'm really happy. I always have the saying, when you're building a car or a kit car, you sort of obsess on every part, and you want these parts to not only be functional but to look good. So I got both of those lines through the one side of the radiator. You can see that number 6 line up to the dryer and then into the foot box, and then the number 8 line goes into a specialty fitting, and then it comes out the side of the front compartment. Basically, the line here denotes where the structure is for the nose of the car, so it'll clear that area, and you can see the number 8 line goes to the back up to the compressor. On the other side, I use the same type of fitting, and this is the bleed line for the radiator. So I don't think maybe you can see the fitting. Anyway, it's tucked in there. So I used a number 6 vintage air bulkhead, and I took the tube cover off, and it's got a nice barb fitting, so it works out well for 1/4-inch tubing. I've got the standoff, so you got the baby line over here, and then you got the papa line over here, but I always like the symmetry. The other thing that I didn't show, I put the hoses on, and you can see, they're really, they're in nice and high, right behind the dashboard, so they're not going to interfere with the passenger's legs. So anyway, we'll sort of zoom out here, and a lot is happening on the build here. So anyway, I think we'll call it a wrap. As always, thanks for watching, and take care.